Hello and welcome to This Writing Life with me, Stuart White, and I'm joined today by Melissa Welliver and Emily Randall-Jones. And today we're going to be discussing writing barriers and the problems that writers face when they're unable to write. So we're going to chat a little bit ourselves about our own writing barriers, and then we're going to go on to discuss some of the opinions and ideas and thoughts that you've shared with us on writing barriers. Some are quite common, others are a bit more niche to people, but we'll have a look at all of those over the course of the episode. So first of all, hi Emily and Melissa, how are you doing?
Hello. Good, thanks.
Good. Yeah. Good. Mysterious voice.
Yeah. Yeah, Emily's not on camera if you're watching on YouTube, guys, but obviously if you're on the podcast, it makes absolutely no difference.
Yeah. That's true.
So yeah, we're going to be chatting a little bit more about that. But before we get on to it, Emily, what have you been up to recently? We haven't done an episode for a little while. Have you been up to anything in your own writing life?
Yeah, so I have just finished proofreading the book, which will be, I've got a cover reveal next Friday, so I can talk more about like what it actually is then. Finally, woohoo! So I've just finished proofreading. I did copy edits, did proofreading. I've got the proofs now, which they are like stunning, and it's really bizarre to think it's going to be going out to people. I've written a list for the publishers of people who I can send it out to. And I'm actually starting to think about the next thing. I say this every time we do one of these. I'm thinking about the next thing. I am actually, like, seriously now. I know what it is. I'm researching. I'm gonna like do anything but sitting down and writing it. But yeah, so yeah, and also kind of ready to launch into kind of marketing this. I think a little bit, which obviously, Melissa, you're like full blown marketing place, aren't you? So.
Yeah, I'm definitely in full blown marketing. It's not too bad, like so far. It's mostly just sort of asking, like, oh, which people do you know that we can send this book to? And because I work for Write Mentor, this will sound so, my diamond shoes are so tight, but I have so many writing friends. So I'm like, give me more parameters than just author, because I feel like everyone I know is a writer. So I don't know what to say. I'm like, oh gosh, I know that sounds really awful actually, because I'm sure some people who are really new to writing and don't have a writing community don't necessarily know loads of writers, but they're coming in, I know loads. So yes, I am in full blown marketing. It's not actually, it's not kicked in too much so far. It's just mostly asking to send it out. But that's what's weird is at this point in time, still probably only 20 or 30 people have read it, maybe at a push. And it's 7 weeks till publication, or maybe it's 6 weeks. It's 6 weeks. I sent out a newsletter saying 6 weeks, and I must have counted. It's 6 weeks. February has tricked me. It's 6 weeks till publication, so that's kind of crazy. But yeah, it should ramp up.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, it's exciting. And I'm actually one of those people that has read the book. I got to read an early draft, didn't I? So yeah, but it's brilliant. It's really, really good. I'm very excited about it. And yeah, it's gonna. I think I predict. In fact, I don't just predict. I know it's going to do really well. So I hope you're enjoying this running, because obviously it'll get busy around the time, won't it?
I think it will, yeah, and it's quite nice because I've had such a long run up. And as Stuart was just saying, how amazing a writer I am. If you're on YouTube, I just like glowed like the sun because I'm sat in front of my window. So I'm very white right now. So sorry about that if you're watching. But again, if you're listening, then it probably doesn't make a difference. But maybe it'll make you go to the YouTube channel and watch just to see. But yes, so I'm feeling excited about it. But because it's been such a long run up, I feel quite relaxed at the minute. You know, when you're waiting for something for such a long time, it's like, if you love Christmas, you can't get excited in February about Christmas because that would be crazy. Like, you know what I mean? So I've gone through like ups and downs of being excited. But at the minute, I don't feel like miserable about it. I just feel sort of calm, which will probably change. But right now it's fine.
And of course, you've been working on...
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. Sorry, Stuart.
No, I was just going to say you've been working on something else as well, Melissa, so I think that's probably taking your mind off it.
Yeah, that really helps. So I don't know if I spoke about it last time we were on the podcast. It'd be interesting to go back. But in November, decided to do NaNoWriMo, and it did not work for me at all. Like, I just couldn't get into the voice. But I did do loads of plotting because I'm a big plotter. And then December, as for most people, I'm sure, it was just a write-off in terms of, like, not like actual writing, just like literally couldn't do any because, you know, family and blah, 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 which is lovely, but also didn't do any writing. So I wrote it in January. I think I finished the last day of January or something. I think I wrote from the 3rd till the 31st. So yeah, so yeah, that actually really helped, and that's gone off. And I did some editing in February as well. Because my agent knew it was coming in, so she like cleared a spot, which is Emily's agent as well. So she'd like cleared a spot so we could get it done, boom, boom, boom. And it was quite nice to get that sent off. And now I feel like I can have a bit of a break and get back to my mentees. It's to read other people's stuff, which is quite nice, and read books and things. So yeah, that has really helped, actually, I must admit. It's that old adage of get busy, don't just sit around and wait, do something else, whether it be writing or something else. I'm quite enjoying, actually, the last couple of weeks. I've just been doing mentoring work, reading, and that's been really nice as well, writing a couple of articles for different types of writing, not writing a book project, which has been nice. So yeah, the old adage works, and it's annoying, but it's true. Don't just sit around and wait for news.
And Emily, obviously you were talking there about having done your proofs and you got your cover reveal coming up. When is the cover reveal?
It's the 10th of March, so Friday. At 1 p.m. Unless like another monarch dies, like it happened with Melissa.
Yeah, that's what happened with me.
When it is. But, that's probably treason what I just said. But yeah, theoretically it's going to be on Twitter. The Chicken House account are going to be revealing it on Twitter Friday 10th of March at 1 o'clock. So yeah, that like it's so exciting because I saw my cover right at the very beginning. Like they had it. It was, I think, quite unusually, it was right at the beginning part of the process because they managed to get hold of this amazing designer, and that was the slot that they had. I'm very, very glad they did. And yeah, so it's actually I've known the cover for something like a year and a half now or something crazy like that. So I'm really, really excited to actually be able to show other people now.
You've got the same cover designer as me, Emily.
I do.
Yeah, Michaela Alcano.
I do,
yeah, she's so good.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah. She honestly, it was I mean, she was so quick as well. Like she came back with like, you know, the roughs within like a day or something. I know it was like, I was like, oh, I really like her outfit on the cover. Can't say too much. But then I went away, I was like, oh, I've written that outfit. Like she'd obviously like taken really kind of, like I think you mentioned this before, like really sort of specific details from the book. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, how has she just reached into my head? It's amazing.
She's so good and she's so nice. Oh, I love her. Besties.
Super excited to meet her.
Yeah, she's so nice.
And she's doing so well, isn't she? She's so in demand, as you say, that you have to just take her when she's available, even if it's a year and a half in advance.
Yeah. It's true.
Exactly. So yeah, I think they were just like, oh, you know, while she's here, while we've got her, we'll jump on her and then make sure that it gets done, and it did, which is amazing.
Oh, exciting! So exciting times for both of you. You've got some cool things coming up. Well, obviously, the next time we do the podcast, we'll probably be able to chat a little bit more freely about a couple of the things as well. So that'll be good. And Melissa, you have your book launch coming up in April as well.
Yeah, so the book comes out on the 13th. I don't actually have anything booked to do that day, which I think's a nice thing to do. Like not be concentrating on, you know, sort of when I'm freaking out about maybe like Twitter and blah, 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 and everything else that takes over your life on launch day. Yeah. And then we're doing some launch type event things, which we're still faffing about with details. But yeah, no, it should be a really good month. I've got quite a lot lined up, and I've got like an event at Waterstones the day before in Manchester, which is really nice. So that it's only one day before the book comes out. So obviously we've got copies and stuff. So yeah, there's quite a lot going on in future, which is nice to think about. But I was just going to say, Stuart, you've totally like done yourself down. You've got a book out. Never mind me and Emily, who are sat around waiting. How's that like? It's been out. I know it's been out like what, 2 weeks, something like that.
I know, but I'm the host. I'm not supposed to just sit and talk about myself. So.
I'm making you. What's it like? 2 weeks out.
No, it's going well. I've learned a lot of the tricks of the trade, so I always have a copy handy next to you.
Mine's behind me. I've not learned.
So yeah, it literally sits. I basically use it as like a mouse pad almost.
Yeah.
Just so it's so close to the computer, because obviously when you're doing videos or you're doing a quick TikTok or something, it's good to have it to hand. I've got the biggest poster that I could possibly purchase of the book cover in the background as well, just to make sure. Yeah, good. Apparently, what's that called when it's like background marketing or something?
Oh yeah, like subconscious marketing or something like that, where it's just all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's what you need to do.
The more people see it, the more likely they are.
Yeah.
Did you not say to me the other week, Melissa, people need to see something 9 times?
Well, I used to hear it was 7 times when it was old marketing, but my friend who works in digital marketing said now, because we're so filled with stuff all the time and we're always scrolling, it has to be 21 times now.
What?
That's like the new number, because they do these like studies on it, don't they? So that they can work out. So yeah, 21 times. That's why if anyone is unfortunate enough to follow me on TikTok, I just need it taken off me, man. I just make all these TikToks because everyone's so creative on TikTok. So I just copy them, of course, because I have no creativity, and make all these book talks, which are really, really fun to make anyway. But yeah, it's just basically spamming my book across TikTok. It's just so people can see it lots of times. And I had a marketing meeting, I think, so because we both did the same marketing meeting, I'm sure Emily was told the same thing, but they said that when you have your Instagram squares, like when people are scrolling through, your book should appear at least 3 or 5 times. She said, like, the cover of your book, even if it's a reel or whatever. Yeah, see, Emily remembers that. Like, and I'd never really thought of it like that. Like, obviously, when you go to these marketing things, some things seem obvious, and other things like, really? It's that important to go, yeah, like, if you're looking at that top sort of 6 or 9 squares, we should be able to see your book X many times. Which is, I suppose on Instagram, you don't have a banner, but that's like a whole other conversation. But yes, it's like very complicated, all the marketing stuff. So yeah, 21 times. So I hear.
Yeah, it's like every 3 squares, I think, wasn't it? Every 3 posts on your grid should be like feature your book in one way or the other.
Yeah, something like that. It's crazy.
What if every post in your grid features your book?
Like me.
then basically you're just going to sell out and it's going to be fine. That's all.
Well done. You win.
I'm just looking at mine and it's basically every grid almost.
That's good. I think that's a good thing. Like, that's why people are coming to your, I suppose it's trying to attract people in that don't know you. I've definitely looked up authors before, and especially before I worked in writing, I would look up authors, Instagrams and websites, and sometimes they were trickier to find, or I'd find someone, especially if they had, say, a common name, and I think, is this the author of this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure. And yes, it does happen. I think you just need to make it very easy to find, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's move on a little bit from our current writing status update on to what today's theme is, which is all about the barriers to writing and the things that prevent us from progressing and actually sitting down and doing our writing and being productive and so on. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first with this one?
Volunteered to go first to say whether we're productive or not and what stops us being productive. That sounds terrifying.
Well, Melissa, actually, you're quite unusual in the way that you write, I think. So do you want to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, so I write, I've talked a bit about it on the podcast before. So I write in big chunks. And when I say chunks, I mean like weeks at a time. And then I have a big rest. And like I found that, so for instance, to take my most recent project, so I plotted it in November, but I planned to write it in November. I was just struggling with creativity. I don't even know. I just couldn't get into it. And then in January, from January 3rd, because, 1st of January, I, of course, had been drinking lots of soft drinks the night before. And so felt very fizzy the next day. And then, had a couple of days until I was actually ready to start writing. So 3rd of January, I wrote through. And I wrote every day for several hours a day. And the thing is, I can do that because my job at Write Mentor, I'm required to be at my desk. A lot of my job is answering, say, emails. I can either have those open, or what I sometimes do, which might help, depending on what people said, is I check them once in the morning and once in the afternoon. So I'll check them at like, say, 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then I might just have a quick check at like 5:30 to check nothing was urgent that came in at the end of the day. So I can do that because I'm at my desk anyway. I'm already in my workspace, so it's not too bad. But yeah, I just write all the way through, and I wrote at weekends as well. I barely took a day off. Some days were like crazy, like 5,000 words. Other days were maybe 1,000, especially at the beginning. And then when I had the 2 weeks to edit, I found it quite difficult because the creative well had run dry. 2 weeks of really focused on a story. I didn't watch anything that was a drama, for instance, because I didn't want to get any of the stories in my head. Didn't read. It was quite hard. And then I did the 2 weeks editing, did as best I could, but had to admit to my agent in the end, like, there are some things here that I know need to change, but I don't have any ideas left. Like, I'm struggling a bit now. And so then I have this big break. And so now I'm on my big break, and it's really nice, and I'm catching up with other stuff that's still writing adjacent. As I said, I'm writing a couple of articles, for instance, for my publicist who wants to maybe try and send them out. So that's quite a nice different type of writing, but yeah, it's much less intense than it was. So I think that helps me stay productive, but also I'm certainly not a writer that writes every day. And I think I could do it, but the lifestyle I live right now affords me to do it this way. So I do it this way. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think it's important for people to realise that because the general advice that people give, which I don't necessarily agree with, is that you should write a little bit every day if you can.
Yeah.
And obviously that will all accumulate and build up. And in some ways that's quite a healthy habit, but it's not for everyone, is it? And the way that you do it obviously suits you and your lifestyle and so on better.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have any kids. I live currently at home with my parents, but we are looking to move house soon. And buy our first house. So that'll probably scupper quite a lot of any writings. Everyone knows what it's like to move house. It's always hell. So, I live a particular lifestyle where I'm able to do that. I don't have responsibilities knocking on my door every 5 minutes. I have a very supportive family, very supportive partner who understands if I say I'm doing this all day on Sunday, they won't disturb me. So it's quite easy. Not that other people's partners are supportive, but it's really difficult if you've got, say, little distractions or you have in-laws coming over or whatever it may be, whereas we just don't live that kind of lifestyle. So I'm able to do this. I have a feeling in future, obviously that would change if my lifestyle changed. But right now I can do it this way, and therefore I like doing it this way. And it means I can be productive and possibly pop out a couple of books in a year. So I'm choosing to do it that way right now. But obviously you guys both have kids. Stuart, you're living, obviously, you have like a mortgage to pay, like a grown up, and like you run a business and are a teacher, and I'm not doing that. Yeah, what's all that about?
But interestingly, the thing I wanted to drill into a wee bit there, Melissa, was when you said in November you couldn't really get into it, if that makes sense. You can't get in. And so, like, I guess what if you can recall back that far, what was it about? The process that you couldn't get into? What was the stumbling block for you?
Yeah, so for me, it was voice, like 100% voice. And also, I think I talk to a lot of people and they say the same thing. The first chapter I find really difficult. I was actually talking to Julia Tufts, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, Julia Tufts, who wrote Hexed and Twice Hexed, the follow-up. And she was saying that she quite likes the first sort of 20K. And she gets like really like, oh, I've got this new idea and I'm going to race into this story. And I do not. I think when I first started writing, I did. That's because I never finished a project. So of course I learned the first 20K because that's when I would stop. That would be the end. And I hated the middle. But actually now I've started plotting. I find the beginning really hard because first of all, coming up with an interesting beginning always comes last for me. It's always a bit boring, my beginning. I've got to write myself in and get in there. And I follow Save the Cat. So that first 10% I'm doing setup. And sometimes I don't know the setup well enough yet. So it's not great. And I don't mind doing the middle because everything's plotted. So it's fine. And the ending is the best bit. I usually roll quite quickly towards the end. Like I don't worry if I'm falling behind the first half of the month because I know the end. I could write like 10,000 words in a day if I know there's like the end of the tunnel and I'm like racing towards it. But I think it was just beginning it. New project. I hadn't actually written since I'd been in some sort of lockdown, which might have been a thing. Because obviously it was on and off, wasn't it, all through? And my partner was a teacher at the time. And Stuart, for me, a teacher, like schools were in and out and everything was chaos and there wasn't really much of a schedule. So maybe that was why. But yeah, I just really struggled to get into it. And the first 5 days of January that I was writing from the 3rd to the 8th were awful. I think I wrote like sometimes maybe 300 words in a day. It was really hard. Once I got past 10K, I was okay, though. And that's always like that for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, Emily, what about you then? What kind of barriers do you face to your writing? What are the things that prevent you from doing that?
So I guess there's it's the kind of the two sides of the same coin, I suppose. There's the like internal stuff, a little bit like where your head's at, and there is the external stuff. Like I have 2 kids who are 2 and 4 at the moment, and very supportive village, but I am doing a lot of it sort of. It's me and them at the moment, and so time wise that is difficult, and just kind of like balancing responsibilities and that kind of thing is really tough. And I'm not one of those people that can like get up at 4 o'clock and start writing before they wake. That's not going to happen. I like my sleep way too much, and I will be like super useless. Like there would be no words if I did that. Just like trying to find time is really tough. And I find that I can't, especially when I'm like first starting a thing, I can't just do it in chunks. It has to be like I have to kind of sit there and get myself in the world, involved in it, so I kind of start to fall in love with it and swim inside it, if you know what I mean. So it's not like I can be like, oh, I've got 10 minutes here, I've got 20 minutes here, blah blah blah. So I have to know I've got like a solid sort of set of time, I guess, to sit down and dedicate myself to it. But also, I'm a horrible procrastinator. As I've talked about before, I have ADHD, and me actually sitting down and starting something is really tough. And once I kind of done it, once I've started it, it's okay. But it's really hard to sit down and start it. So I guess that's more of the internal stuff. But also, I think that kind of stuff in your head, whether you have ADHD or not, you can put too much pressure on it. I think if it really becomes a kind of thing in your head, you're like, I have to do this, I have to write this thing. And especially when it's become kind of more of your job, as it obviously kind of become part of my job, which is really lovely. And I'm very lucky, but it's kind of gone from being this lovely thing that I did to relax my brain.
Right.
And, there were no time limitations. It was just, as and when, hop in and out. And now it's like, people are waiting for this now. You kind of you have to do this. You have to crack on. And that makes it harder to start somehow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think, and I think also if I haven't been around like much creativity, if I've been doing other stuff, what have you, if I haven't seen many of my writer friends, if I haven't been reading, I find that really tough. If I'm in there, then I can kind of crack on. That was a bit of a ramble. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Okay, good.
It does all make sense, and I'm sure like a lot of people listening will relate to many of those things as well.
Yeah.
What we're going to do next is we're actually going to look at a few of the replies to the tweet I put out about this, and we'll chat a little bit about what people have said, and if they are relatable to us or not, we'll have a wee discussion around it. So the first person to reply was Maz Evans, who said, everything that being an author requires that is not actually writing is her biggest barrier. So events, promo, admin. She said she spends so much more time on these things than creating stories.
Yeah. Admin's the killer, I find. We were talking, I think, so it's World Book Day week. I want to say week, and I think it's because of some of the teachers' strike. We're kind of really pushing the week thing this year.
Yeah.
So all of my author friends are doing that. I went to self-publish, so it's a bit trickier for me to sell books in schools for my first book, and then obviously the second book's not out yet. So actually, I didn't tout for World Book Day, and I'm not doing anything for World Book Day, and I'm actually quite relaxed about it, especially when I see it is quite stressful for authors. I know some authors that are doing more than one school in a day, and all sorts of things. And I do find the thing that takes the most time, some schools are brilliant and help you in advance. Like there was a university I did something for, and they helped me do all the filing in advance to get paid. But my goodness, sometimes chasing invoices. I've been self-employed since I was 16, and it's always, doesn't matter what industry you're in. Anybody who's self-employed will know chasing invoices is the number one time suck that you're not paid for. And it's really, really tough. Not that you are still paid. If you're writing a book and you're in contract, I suppose you are still being paid for it. I know we've had conversations about whether that's fair pay or not before, but you are still being paid for it. The tough thing with admin is every hour you're spent chasing something is just a time suck, a creativity suck. I totally see where she's coming from. That is one that definitely, and it can get you a little bit down, I think, as well, because it's not the most fun bit of being an author.
Yeah. And the thing is with invoices too is it's so frustrating because you've done the work. You should just get paid.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't be then spending additional time, which is valuable time, not taken away from writing, it's taken away from family or other job you might have, it is one of the most frustrating things that I hear from authors is having to do that. And I don't know. I mean, I think, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's big systems, isn't it? Where you've got the local council have got an accounts department which don't speak to the teachers, which don't, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's
not often the teacher's fault at all, I will point out. And quite often that I've had lovely contacts who've really helped me to get paid when I've been struggling. And they've gone in there, said, I'll go in personally and sort it out, because I might be, say, 100 miles away by the time I'm back home, and it's tough. So I totally understand that. And it's not just the time, it's the creativity is sucked when you have to do some admin like that, which is maybe a wishy-washy thing to say from a nice privileged position. But it is true. It's like what Emily was saying about being in the right mood. I had to write, I'm really feeling quite tired after getting those edits done. And then I was doing lots and lots of mentoring for my lovely mentees. And it's a lot of creative work so it kind of, you're quite tired at the end of it. Yesterday I had to write an article about putting the funny back into dystopia, right? And oh God, it was awful. It was so not funny. It was the most boring. I read it back. I thought, this is so boring. This is so depressing. It was actually depressing. It was actually a depressing article. And I got my partner to read it, and he read it through, and he didn't know how to tell me. It's like, think it just needs a bit of editing. And I was like, is it funny though? And he's like, it's not particularly funny. If anything, it's depressing. I was like, I knew it was. So yeah, you have to be in the right mood as well. And admin can suck that mood. 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Do you think though it's maybe more of a established author problem? Like, you know, you guys are both relatively at the start of your writing careers, so
yeah,
you're probably not spending as much time on those kind of things right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like I can see, like being part of like the 2023 debut group and the 2022 debut group already, like, you know, experiencing some of the stuff that they are like going through. I don't know how anyone fits it in, because obviously a lot of people have full-time, well, you know, most have full-time jobs as writers. You know, there's a reason why they talk about it being for the, you know, the more privileged people who can kind of quit their jobs to do it, to focus on it permanently, because you've got your full-time job. Quite often there's caring responsibilities, there's actually writing the things. And then when are you supposed to do all this kind of like admin and marketing side of it as well? Like there's just not enough hours in the day. And I can see why people can get burned out if there's not kind of boundaries set, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a bigger conversation than just us, I guess, on this podcast. But you know, this is really something for you know, authors to be speaking to, I guess, their publishers and so on about. I mean, I guess if you're a successful enough author, then you can farm out some of your admin. I know that there's agencies and stuff out there that will deal with all your event stuff, isn't there?
Yes.
Like Authors Allowed, are they called?
Yeah, they do school visits. Or if you're like Brandon Sanderson, he set up his entire own publishing branch and hires all his friends to do all of his admin. So that sounds great. Let's just do that.
Yeah. So, but I think you have to get to a certain stage before that can happen for you. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on from that one and let's look at some of the other barriers. So, the next one's from Anna Britton. She says, I used to have a much bigger struggle with my self-esteem, which spilled over into my writing. So she said, how could I write anything when everything I did was, and then she's used an expletive there beginning with S.
Oh no, Anna.
Bless you.
So yeah, I guess, but that's a big problem, isn't it? It's like we often talk about the biggest barrier to our writing is sometimes ourselves and, you know, what's happening inside our own heads.
Yeah, I've had to let go of. I wouldn't actually say I was a perfectionist, but I am a control freak. And sometimes those things have a crossover. They're not quite the same, but they do have a crossover. Stuart, we talked about this before with you self-publishing and therefore being technically in charge of when the book goes to the next stage of editing, etc. And it's so tempting to keep pulling at it. And I've just found, like, so for instance, this book I just wrote that I wrote in a month, and then I did another 2 weeks on it. And, you know, me and my agent did a round of edits. And we got to a point where we were saying to each other, my creative well was dry. We got to a particular point and the agent's saying, listen, you know, the publisher, they want to help grow your brand and help you with this book. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the most polished book in the world, like say it does when you're going on submission and you're basically cold calling people saying, please buy this thing from someone you've never heard of. It's a little bit different because we have a relationship now. And so when that's going on submission and people, even other houses have read my stuff. So it's a little bit different now and I have a bit more of a reputation. So I did send it less polished than I normally
you have
would.
A reputation.
Reputation, for better or worse. And yeah, so I've sent it off now and now I'm thinking, oh God, like I can see all the things that are wrong with it. However, it doesn't need to be, and I've let that go quite a lot. I do first drafts anyway, and I don't read it back. People say, oh, how do you cope with the crap first draft? And I'm like, oh, if I could say crap. Too late, I've done it. And I was like, oh, what do I do? You know, how do you get past it? I'm like, I don't even know if it's good or bad because I don't read it. I'm just writing. I don't go back and read it because then I will know. Like everyone's read a first draft and most of it's terrible. But then maybe there's one sentence or one paragraph where you're like, that was quite good, actually. I just pretend it's all like that. And just hope for the best and get to the end. So I do understand exactly what Anna's talking about, and I have got a bit better at just letting it go. But it is easier when I've got the support of a publisher or an agent who's telling you, you're not terrible at this. That is helpful, and it can be quite lonely before you get to that stage.
Yeah, totally. I feel like generally it's a thing anyway, that it's so hard not to rely on external validation, isn't it? You know, and because especially like a huge like swathe of your writing career is before you get that, it is all you're getting is actually like the complete opposite of validation, which is rejection and like, you know, self-doubt and stuff. And it's so easy for me to say like, oh, you have to kind of pull some sort of strength from somewhere, but actually like that's not natural for everyone. That's not something that everyone can do. It's really, really hard to do. So yeah, I think it's just about, trying not to chase perfection, but that's so hard, isn't it? And if you're the sort of person who does that naturally, you can't just stop doing that. That's really hard. But yeah, just trying to be kind to yourself, I guess, as much as possible. And like you say, if that involves like not reading over your first draft of stuff, like if that's what you need to do, because I think the trouble is as well, especially if you've written a really good like book or story or what have you, and then you start again, you're like, oh my god, this is truly terrible. Like it's not going to be the same, is it, as the first one?
No,
I suppose that's the thing. But you can know all this stuff like logically, but you're actually kind of letting that sort of breathe and sort of it's really hard.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. Yeah, hearing both your perspectives on that. I quite like that, Melissa. Actually, that whole just write the first draft and then don't read it.
Yeah, I read it later when I'm editing. I do some work, but I'm not that bad.
Yeah, because I definitely do that. I definitely read back stuff that I've done and do the continually change things as I go and. I don't think that's healthy for you, and also you can be totally blocked by the fear of what you're about to write not being as good as you want it to be.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you plot, like, I think what I do works because I'm a plotter. So, because some people have said, like, well, how do you remember? Well, first of all, remember I'm writing in these very short sprints. So again, this may change in future. I know exactly what I'm writing because I was either writing an hour ago or yesterday. It's like the biggest gap I will have. So that's fine. I'm fully immersed in the story and I'm not reading anything else. And it's all plotted. So I know exactly in each chapter, I have a couple of sentences at the top telling me what's happening. And I also do that thing of when I finish a chapter, I write the first sentence of the next chapter. Yeah. Even if it's just like a few words, just so I'm into it. So I don't have to read it back. But maybe if you were not, I was just thinking, if you're not a plotter, you might have to read a bit of it back just to check what you were doing. Or if obviously it's been like 2 weeks since you last wrote, then obviously you might have to read it back.
Yeah.
But I do not.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, let's move on because there's a number of other ones which are important to chat about. So the next one's being exhausted from working full time in a physically and emotionally draining job. So there's an overwhelm from personal circumstances too, and I think we've kind of touched on that, but I think that's definitely a big factor, isn't it?
Yeah, hugely. Like, and I feel especially if you're in a job where you are kind of like mentally burned out, because like my old job, I'm thinking about when I was writing then, like I had two parts of it. I was either sat in an office doing like admin and doing events planning and that kind of stuff, or I was out like on the ground like with volunteers and kind of running the stuff and being outside and running around. And actually personally I found like sitting at the computer at the end of that day I was so much less ready to write because my brain was so tired and I was like, I don't want to do it. When I've been out all day like on my feet, it was much easier to sit down and do something because like you're tired but you're not like mentally exhausted. So it is really, you just want to kind of switch off, don't you, when you want to come in, and trying to force yourself to write on top of all that is really hard.
Yeah, definitely. Brandon Sanderson, I know I've mentioned him twice now. I don't know what's happening. It's obviously a fan cast. But he does these free YouTube tutorials. Oh, I don't want to call them tutorials. Not really. Lectures. That's the word for it, lectures. And they are at a university that he does. And the reason he took the job was so he could release them online. So that's also a really good thing if you're ever feeling like down about your writing, but something writing adjacent, is watch somebody else talking about writing. And he said that lots of students would ask him, what's a really good job for me to apply for whilst I'm writing my epic future best-selling fantasy novel? And he would say, don't do something too strenuous with your brain if you want to be writing after work. That is not to suggest that any jobs are particularly less taxing than other jobs. It's just they're taxing in different ways and different parts of your brain or your physical muscles are being used. So I kind of see where he was coming from, whereas obviously a lot of people, I think, who want to do creative writing, do creative pursuits as their full-time job. And so that makes it a little bit trickier when, you're completely drained from thinking of stuff at work. Say, even if it's like, say, in marketing or something, you have to come up with ideas all the time. And then you're coming home and trying to come up with ideas for your novel. That's going to be really tough. Yeah. So I totally understand. I think the only way around that, again, I would say, because I'm obsessive about this, would be if you already have the plot down and you spent that time. I plotted in November and then wrote in January. And I think having the gap was really good. Like, I think I would do that again, because it meant I added stuff in, so it was still fun and fresh when I came to it, because I was definitely adding stuff because I thought of more stuff, and because it was all plotted, even if I didn't feel like it that day, and it's maybe not as funny as I wanted it to be or not as romantic as I wanted, but whatever mood I wanted to create, I at least knew what was happening with the plot and I could get it down. even if I wasn't feeling it. So maybe that's a way around it, being super organized. But it's a really tough one. I don't know how you get around that. I don't know. What do you think, Emily?
What do I think? It's difficult because obviously I am the
question.
antithesis of super organized. So that is difficult.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that break is really important, and actually something that is kind of really important in all swathes of life. But swathes, that's not the right term. Paths of life.
We're writers, guys.
Well, swathes of life. You've heard it here first. It's setting boundaries for yourself, and also then, understanding how you work, like what is good for you, and then carrying that on throughout your career. As much, it's so easy for me to say, as like in the position that I'm in right now as agented and under contract, but I know that something I found really helpful is knowing how I work, like knowing when I'm not going to be able to produce something really well, like, so not over promising and being like, yeah, I can do this, and being totally honest with yourself, and then also being really honest with the kind of the stakeholders that you're going to be working with, like be that agents, be that publishers, how you'd be your writing group, however that looks like if you can't do something, if you need a certain length of time to do something, people will understand. I think being really honest from the outset about who you are and how your brain works is only going to benefit you. Because I have discovered, when I started out with my writing group, who are amazing, I was like, yeah, I'll read that. Yeah, I'll read that. Yeah, I'll read that. And I just didn't. And then I didn't get a chance to, or like my brain was not, whatever. And then you feel like, oh, you're letting people down, and the same with, like when I first got under contract, I was like, oh yeah, I can hit that deadline. No problem. I can hit that deadline. And then you kind of realize, oh no, I can't actually. I need a little bit longer. Or you say to the writing group, like, I can't get that right now, but I can get to it like within the next month, if that's okay. Or I'll do the next thing, whatever. And people respond much better to that and that kind of honesty and those boundaries than if you're kind of like promising things and then not able to follow through with it. Because publishers and agents generally, if you're kind of open about it, they are pretty good at making those accommodations and working around you.
Yeah,
and the same with writing groups, I think, as well. Whatever stage you're at, that honesty is important.
Yeah, that I completely agree. Just, Melissa, very quickly on your point there about Brandon Sanderson. Did he not work, was it night shift as like a porter or something somewhere?
Yeah, he did do night shift doing something where it was low creative energy, where he could he had lots of time on his own to think.
That's
which
right.
is a really interesting way of doing it. Yeah, it was definitely a night shift thing. Yeah,
so I think he just had to keep an eye on something.
Yeah,
looking at security cameras all night, so he could and apparently he just sat and wrote all night.
Yeah, and he could do. I mean, obviously, if anyone knows Brandon Sanderson, he's prolific. He writes over 1 million words a year. It's absolutely, and I'm not over exaggerating when I say that. He wrote 3 or 4 books last year, and each had about 250,000 words. So he definitely knows what he's doing, and obviously he's very practiced, and that's a massive difference as well. I've noticed now I'm more practiced, and this is it's a 3rd book I'm looking at publishing, but it's like my 5th or 6th book I've finished, which isn't even that practiced. But I definitely have learned, like Emily says, how I work. And what works for me right now. And so I've kind of lent into that, and that's really helped. And not feeling bad if you've not written for X amount of time, stuff like that. So I definitely agree with what Emily said.
Yeah, and so do I. And it's interesting because you both have, obviously, the way you've described it, you have very different, I guess, routines, or the way in which you outpour your creativity and you complete your books and so on. And it was interesting because I got asked to do an article the other day where I had to describe a typical creative day.
Oh, no.
I know. So I was like, well, this is going to be tricky for me, but I tried to do it and it just wasn't working because, so I looked at the previous articles. They'd asked other authors to write a similar thing, and I'd looked at the previous ones, and I don't know, some people just live such different lives. They were talking about how they get up and, they sit and they write for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, and, and then they go out for a walk to sort of clear the cobwebs and get their creative things going. Then they read a bit in the afternoon and blah, blah. And they were doing all these things. And I was like, oh my God,
that sounds chill.
That is it's like a utopian author life. It's not, that's not realistic. And maybe some people are, they're in the fortunate position where they can do that with their days. But yeah, when I was writing mine down, I was like, so I get woken up usually by my daughter at 7 a.m. with demands for breakfast, and you go down and you give her breakfast. I've got to get my son ready, who demands to be carried everywhere at the moment, so I never have a hand free. Like then you take them to the childminder at 8 a.m. Then I go to school and I do my whole day's schoolwork, blah blah blah. I pick them up from the childminder at 4. I take them home, give them dinner, then they go for a bath and then bed, blah blah. And I was thinking about it, I was like, and so then like I have to do like write mentor admin and so on throughout the day. And I was writing it down, like basically break times and lunch times at school. My other job, I'm sitting doing emails and replying to things and blah blah. And we actually looked at like the time that I have for creativity on a typical day. It was so little.
Yeah, it wasn't a creative day; it's a creative hour.
Yeah, exactly. And but I think that's important because I wanted to actually write that article.
Yeah.
But we decided not to in the end with the person, the editor person, because it's not really a creative day, if you know what I mean. It's just my normal hectic day. But I thought it'd have been good to publish it from the point of view that so many people look at writers and they see that idealistic utopian creative day that some writers have, and they think that that's what theirs day should be like as a writer, and it's not realistic, and it's not for 99% of people. That's not what it's going to be like. Yeah. And I wonder if we do need to be a bit more clear about that. About even very like I remember Terry Brooks, who's like the New York Times best-selling fantasy author from like the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I think that's really interesting that even someone as hugely successful as that had to continue being a lawyer for like a number of years. And continue to, his full-time job, even though his book was at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. He was still like stealing a couple of hours in the evening after his high stress, high energy job to write New York Times bestsellers. And I think that is something that I wonder if it's not shared often enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my tuppence worth on that situation. But like so many of the best-selling authors that you look at on a list are probably not actually full-time authors. They're doing a variety of other things as well.
Yeah, so many of them as well, which is what's so scary, because I think we all think, exactly, I've read those. I read one by Dan Brown. Dan Brown did a day in the life of, it's in one of the papers. They always do one. It's not just authors, but they like to do authors because every author has a different story on what their day in life is. And Dan Brown's was like, wake up next to my beautiful supermodel wife, do yoga for 2 hours. Like, if I feel like writing, I'll write for maybe 4 hours, and then I come out and there is all my family ready to go. And it wasn't quite that bad, but it was very much, it felt like an out of touch reality for most people. And that's not how it works especially early on. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a hustle, isn't it?
Massively.
Just to, do normal life and also have that creative life alongside it. And most of us aren't privileged enough to have that as our main part of our life. But yeah, anyway, I think we've ran a wee bit over for the episode, so I think we'll sort of wrap up there. But just to quickly summarise, most of the replies were talking about busy lives, kids, and chronic illness came up a lot as well. As been big barriers to that, and I can definitely sympathise on both counts there. And obviously the things like email and admin and all the other promotional activities that being an author entails as well prevent you from actually doing the writing. So it is definitely a tough gig. No easy life for the majority of people, and I guess it's important for people who are newer writers to realise that going in, because otherwise you can I can imagine you get quite miserable if you expected this as your dream life and the way it turned out was very different.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that like when you're starting out as well, it's understanding, like I was saying, right now in my life, this is how I write. I'm very aware that both my life and my writing life will change, and deadlines will be different, and I might have more projects one year, I might have less projects. So I'm already aware that writing life, that article I might write right now saying what my creative day looks like will be completely different in a year or 5 years or 10 years, whatever it may be, or however long I'm lucky enough to keep publishing. It will look completely different. So I think it's also just being flexible and knowing that just because it looks like this now, that's not forever, for better or worse, to be honest.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, totally.
Any final thoughts, Emily?
Yeah, no, I just agree with Melissa. I think it's like, I think, yeah, like enjoy, when you have got the time or when you have got like the capability to do it, like be it that like a week, a day, or like, like a couple of years, then yeah, I think that's just enjoy it while you kind of got it. And I think setting boundaries is just like the main thing. Like for me, I think it's really hard to do in all like swathes of life. It's really hard to kind of be like, this is the time I'm doing this is the time I'm doing that, and being clear about it. But yeah, I think it's like, I love writing. I love it so much. It's always been like where my brain has been the happiest. And, you don't want to lose that. So I think any way you can kind of make that still your happy place, whatever that works for you, is the best thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and definitely if you keep yourself in love with the process, then it will help you through all those other miserable things you have to do in life to get by. Okay, that's probably a nice note to finish on for this episode. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to those who replied to the tweet as well and contributed to the discussion in the episode today. And obviously thanks to Emily and Melissa for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye for now.